Hello, it's me, Coco. Today, I'm back after taking a little bit of a break. The past couple of weeks have been pretty intense, and I didn't really feel like I wanted to make any videos for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I didn't really think that anything that I had to say was more important than what was going on, and I really wanted to leave space for that conversation. And number two, watching the news and participating in these discussions was really difficult for me, and I kind of needed that time and space to participate and process just for myself. However, I'm back. One thing that's happened over this course of this time is that some Confederate monuments have been taken down. I think that's great. Confederate monuments maybe have a place in our culture, in our country, but not in the form of monuments in public spaces where everybody can see that glorifies the soldiers, the people who wanted to secede from the United States so that they could continue to practice slavery. I didn't really think that I would live to see the day that they would actually come down. But here we are. The Confederate statues are coming down, these symbols of racism and systemic oppression coming down, and that is awesome. And I hope that we can replace them with statues that inspire everybody that sees them instead of just some. If those statues were ever really inspiring to anybody. Anyway, I started thinking about other things that I thought were impossible, that I would never live to see the day, and I'm going to talk about some of them. You might agree with me on some of them, but here we go. Starting with actual police reform. We're on this path now. Where is it going? What's going to really happen? I can say that when I was living abroad in South Korea and Macedonia, the police had a much more passive presence. I barely ever saw the police in South Korea, even though I was living in Seoul, which is a super densely populated city. In Macedonia, we had our local police, but they were never really patrolling the town, like looking for trouble, trying to write people up. When I moved back here, one of my biggest culture shocks, reverse culture shocks, was the very heavy, very real, militarized, ooh, that's a big spider. Oh my god. Should I tell him to subscribe to my channel or what? Just a little spider hanging out. So if you see me looking down, just making sure he's chilling out right there. Okay. One of the things that was the biggest reverse culture shock for me moving back to the US was this very real, very salient and militarized presence of the police. Whether that be speeding down the highway with their sirens at all times, seeing them, patrolling train stations and the streets in like full gear. It's very energetically jarring. And that's for me to say as somebody who doesn't feel like I'm specifically targeted by the police. I can only imagine what it's like for people who do feel like they're targeted by the police, such as Black and brown people and undocumented residents. Yeah, real police reform. Number two, criminal justice reform and prison reform. I guess those are two things, two separate things, but I would love to see a criminal justice system that is equitable, and for criminal justice to be more restorative justice than punitive justice, because I think that we can see that this punitive justice model isn't really working. It's all part of a very not so simple and yet pretty simple system of oppressing Black and brown people. Let me just give you some numbers to just kind of think about a little bit. So non-Hispanic white people are 64% of the population, and the national incarceration rate is 450 for 100,000 white non-Hispanic people. For Hispanic people, they are 16% of the US population, and they are 831 per 100,000. So that is, they're just like a quarter of the white people and almost double the rate of incarceration. Now look what happens with Black people. This is insane. I hope gives some people a little bit of a jolt to really want some real meaningful change. Black people are only 13% of the population, and for 100,000 people, for non-Hispanic white people it was 450, remember? For black people, 2,306. Oh my gosh. Incarceration doesn't just affect the person who's incarcerated, right? It affects the whole community that they're a part of and their family. Imagine how difficult it is to have a family member in prison and to be unjustly penalized for your skin color just makes it that much worse. So I really hope that we see some equity in the criminal justice system, and then we see prison reform so that it's more restorative justice and we give people the services and help that they need instead of just like locking them up and treating them as less than human, releasing them with very few resources and expecting it to make a difference. So the third thing that I think I might never see change is decriminalizing drugs. I, for various reasons, do not do any drugs whatsoever. I haven't ever even tried CBD. So this is not for like personal reasons, but I just think that it's the right thing to do. The thing is that there are so many legal drugs out there that are basically just being dealt by the pharmaceutical industry. Meanwhile, certain other drugs are being sold. We need to decriminalize these Schedule 1, Schedule 2 drugs so that people can get the help that they need for treatment, and also so that we can get tax revenue off of this like huge industry. We can regulate it and make sure that these drugs are safe and that people are not getting poisoned. It would also have this effect of, you know, some people call it the red button syndrome, where you put a person in a room and you say, don't press the red button, don't press the red button, and all they can think about is pressing the red button. But if instead we have them in the room and we say, you can press the button if you want, it's your choice. You're not going to go to jail for it, but something bad could happen. Far fewer people will press the red button. I mean, the kicker here is that if we decriminalize the drugs, so many of the people who are in prison now would never have gone to prison in the first place. If those people never went to jail, we can keep those communities intact and work on actually restoring them. Maybe so that that drug use wouldn't be necessary in the first place. Decriminalize drugs. The fourth thing that I think I'll never see, but maybe I will, is a real end to homelessness in the US. Why do we have one of the biggest homeless problems in the world when we're one of the richest countries in the world? We have enough money to house every single person who's living on the streets, and yet there are people suffering every day on the street asking for money, and the government should be taking care of its people. A big reason why so many people are living on the streets is because of addiction. So that goes back to the drug issue that I talked about before, and mental health issues. So that takes me to my fifth thing that I think I will never see, but I hope that I do, is like a real mental health care reform where we make mental health care affordable, accessible to everybody. Everybody can use a therapist, like everybody. Like, I need a therapist right now, and I can't speak for you, but probably if you're like most people, you could probably use somebody to talk to. This alone would help people so much, but we stigmatize mental health care, we stigmatize mental illness and make it something that it's not. How do I know that? Because I have a master's degree in professional counseling. I know what mental illness is and what it isn't, and it really isn't something to be stigmatized. Depression and anxiety are the common cold of mental illnesses. We all experience them at one point or another, and we should get to have care for them. So a real mental health care reform and destigmatization, which we can all do a little bit of work on, that would help people of all classes, colors, abilities, period. So that's something that I hope I see a revolution for in the future. And then while we're talking about mental health care, how about physical health care? So like real affordable healthcare for all. In other countries, if you're sick, you go to the doctor. In South Korea, they have one of the best medical systems in the world. Everybody has health insurance. Going to the doctor for a cough or a cold costs you like $3. Here, it might cost you like hundreds because of the way that the health insurance system is set up. So if we have a universal healthcare system, it will help promote people taking care of their everyday needs so that we won't have like greater sickness down the road. Sticking with the kind of medical theme right now, one thing that I hope I see in the future, although I don't know if I ever thought that I would live to see this, is like an actual support for access to feminine care products for girls and women. I mean, imagine if you're a homeless woman, where are you going to get your feminine hygiene products from? These should be free. These should be free. Also, better ones should be developed. I think that we have seen huge progress in the recent past with the use and destigmatization of reusable silicone cups and period panties. I hope that we see even more innovation in the field and make even better products for girls and women, not just in America, but all over the world. Some girls can't even go to school when they're on their period because they don't have access to proper period products. And if we want to tackle the issue of overpopulation in the planet, we know that one of the solutions to that is increasing access to education for girls and young women. And yet we're not even really supporting them during a very predictable time in their month where going to school is really difficult. Increase access to these feminine hygiene products and stop making us pay so much money for them all the time. Stop making them polluting the planet, because for so many women, myself included, for a long time, I felt like I didn't really have any choice but to use plastic and like non-organic cotton tampons and all of that stuff. So I really hope that I see more innovation in this field and an increase of access to more girls and women everywhere. Number 8, here's something not a lot of people are talking about, but it's another group of people that don't really have equal rights, which is marriage rights for polyamorous people. I am not polyamorous, however, I do see an issue for polyamorous people, similarly to gay and lesbian couples who, for example, wouldn't have inheritance rights for their partners or wouldn't be able to see them in the hospital if they got sick. People who have more than one life partner also have to make a decision who gets those rights. Having recently gotten married myself, it's interesting to see how easy it is for some people to make this major decision in their lives, and yet for other people it's like nearly impossible to have the same rights. I haven't really done a deep dive into that issue. Maybe some people have, maybe you have, and you can write in the comments what your thoughts are on it. But I think that there is a lot of room for improvement for rights for polyamorous people. The 9th thing that I think that I will never see, but I really hope that I do, is a true destigmatization of homosexuality and transgender people, or even like gender non-binary people. I think that for people who don't have a lot of direct contact with the LGBTQ plus community, they don't really understand. And when you don't understand something, it's easy to say that it's wrong. This is not the way. We're not all going to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness until everybody has that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We're not going to be free until everybody is free. That means that we need to advocate for the people who have the least rights, the people who are the most marginalized in our community. And it means that sometimes we're going to see people who are different, and we have to look at them and say, hey, what can I do to advocate for you right now? What can I do to make your life just as free as my life? What can I do to affirm you in the way that I want to be affirmed? That I need to be affirmed? That you need to be affirmed? So now we're kind of heading in the direction of like gender and gender equity. The 10th thing that I would love to see is a real pay transparency movement. In the working world, some people get paid more than others for doing the same work. Even knowing how much your boss is getting and all of that, I don't know, it's like weird. HR plays these weird ass games, keeping it secret so that they can save money on some people's paychecks and then pay other people who they think deserve more because of A, B, or C. Maybe their gender, maybe their race, maybe their class. So that it's really a very integral part of this systemic oppression. For an example, a straight, white, able-bodied male might be offered a job at like $80,000 for a particular company, and a transgender black woman would be paid maybe $40,000. Don't tell me what they're teaching all of the HR people in their HR degree courses, but you can really see how this is a problem, right? And if you don't think it's happening, just ask people that you know. Just poke around. The internet is full of all sorts of things. You might find some cases that are contrary to what I just said, but I can pretty much guarantee you that this is like a regular thing. I don't really see a path to like pay equality until we see pay transparency. The last things have kind of like taken some kind of, they had relations to each other, but my next one is just kind of like out of nowhere. It's climate change. I don't know if I'm really going to see in my lifetime politicians and most people who have the power to really take responsibility for climate change. It's not the responsibility of the everyday person who doesn't have access to those top levels where they're making the decisions to make real systemic change in the system, right? That is going to be the responsibility of the powers that be. That's not me. It's probably not you, but if it is, I hope you're listening. We need to make real systemic change and fight climate change if we want to keep the planet in the way that it is good for us. The planet is going to be here. Sustainability is more about sustaining resources for human consumption. After we're gone, the planet is going to be fine, and the animals will probably be fine too. The dinosaurs went extinct and then life went on. But if we want a real peaceful and comfortable world for all of the descendants that will come after us, we need to take care of the planet, and that means not just taking individual responsibility, but fighting for systemic change. The big boys at the top making the big decisions. I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, I haven't given up the fight. Only the future knows what's in store. Like, we don't really know what's in store for us. The next thing that I hope I see is real campaign finance reform. I hope that in the US we overturn Citizens United, which allows corporations to donate to political parties and political candidates as individuals. And this kind of anonymizes the donation by making it under the corporation, and they are also able to just donate massive amounts of money. This is bad because it places the sphere of influence in just a small number of people who can afford it, when really the government is supposed to be working for all people. So I hope that this changes. Moving on, number 13, the end of factory farming. As you probably know, I'm vegan, and if nothing else changes, if like the world doesn't go vegan or even vegetarian, I think most people can get behind the end of factory farming. If you don't agree with me, just do a little Google and just find out what those factory farms are like, and then maybe compare them to the concentration camps in Auschwitz and the most horrifying, terrible sides of humanity. This needs to end. It's not just bad for the animals. It's also bad for the people who work for these factory farms, you know, keeping them going, but just doing this like awful, dirty work. Farming doesn't have to be so heartless, but it is because these giant meat corporations are making it that way. It's also bad for the people who live in the communities around the factory farms. These are usually low-income areas. We know that a lot of low-income areas are people of color. I think in the movie Cowspiracy, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know somebody knows where this scene is from, but this woman is standing out on her porch talking about this factory farm that's near her house, and they just like spray the poop of the animals all over the grass, and it's just like disgusting, and it constantly smells like poop. Why are the companies allowed to do this? Because oppression of low-income people is like part of the fabric of our society, and that needs to end. They're just so inhumane. And then the meat processing plants, we've seen with COVID, we've woken up a little bit to how the meat is processed, and how terrible those conditions are. It's so clear that the companies don't really care about the workers, making them go in to work while the virus is spreading within the meatpacking plant, so that those workers have to go home and spend time with their families and potentially spread it to them. Even the workers themselves are afraid to speak out, you can tell, because when they appear on the news, they don't want to give their name, they don't want to show their face because they're afraid of being penalized. I want to see an end to factory farming, an end to these mass meat packing plants ASAP. But maybe while we're at it, another dream for the world is an entirely vegan world. That would be cool. That would be really cool for everybody to practice veganism, which to me is having compassion for all beings, human or non-human, and that's an emphasis on both the human and non-human, because as a vegan, I believe in speaking up for the rights of marginalized people. But man, wouldn't it be so freaking cool if the whole world was vegan? And there were just like, everything would be the same, it would just be cruelty-free. I had some great vegan fast food today. I had a fried chicken burger and a freaking milkshake, and I'm having cookies and poutine fries and nachos and tacos and all this stuff, right? I eat all of that as a vegan, and so can everybody. And I love knowing that the way that I live doesn't contribute to the suffering of animals, or even people. Just lower suffering overall. That is cool. And that would be freaking cool if everybody was vegan. Although that's going to have to happen on a systemic level too, right? It's just the same way that a lot of people can't go plastic free because they don't have other options. We really need to increase the availability of fresh fruits and vegetables, and have restaurants get on board with making vegan items more prominent parts of their menus, and so on and so forth. Like, there's a lot of work that we can be doing on a lot of different levels. It's not just, up to you. Veganism is totally mainstream. Let's also see a whole end of plastic. You've already heard me make a whole freaking rant about this. I'll post that video there in case you haven't. But basically, we need to see an end to single-use plastics, period. And to be honest, the alternatives already exist. They're glass jars, they are cardboard cartons or boxes, and there are an increasing number of compostable plastic-like alternatives, which I hope that we see a huge explosion of in the future. I think people like plastic for some reasons, like maybe this feeling of hygienicness of plastic products, and disposability of them. We can have all of those things, but maybe with a product or a material that decomposes way faster and doesn't do as much damage to the environment and to the animals and to the people who have to live around all of that garbage. Kind of, on that note, what about like an actual closed loop consumerist society? Like, Closed loop meaning that when you are done using a product, you send it back to the company and then they will make it into something new. The company makes the product over here, they sell it to you over here, you use it, you are done with it, and then it goes back to the company to be disposed of in a ethical way, a sustainable way, or even better, it's made into an entirely new product so that they don't have to keep going back to the original resources to make the products that you use every day. Closed loop consumerism, let's see that happen. Let's make it happen in our lifetimes. All right, here's another detour, also kind of a more dark one, but a real end to human trafficking. This is a huge problem that I think only some people are paying attention to. That's obviously by design, because people who are trafficking other people don't want other people to know about it, because then they won't be able to do what they're doing. But some of the worst evils that people are committing are happening related to human trafficking, slavery, forced prostitution. As somebody who I don't think has ever been in a situation like that, it's almost like unthinkable. This should not happen to anybody. Maybe, just maybe sometime, do a little bit of research about human trafficking, because just the little bit that I've learned for myself is that it's happening everywhere all the time. It's in your town right now. It's happening right under your nose, and we want to put a stop to it. So number 18, an end to child labor. Like, will I ever see this in my lifetime? Like a real end to child labor? This is why we avoid fast fashion. This is why I'm even trying to avoid chocolate and coffee, because a lot of these farms, children are working, and I don't want to be a part of that. A lot of the things that I've been talking about today, I really don't know a whole lot about, but I know enough about them that I want them to end. So, if you know more about these issues, feel free to drop some links in the comments and educate us. We're a little community here, and we can learn more about, what this world is that we live in and what's happening, and sign off on things that we agree with and say no to things that we don't agree with. And so I've talked about some big things. My last one, I'm sorry, it's a little bit anticlimactic, but like fast fashion. This is also a topic that has been discussed at length for years, and yet these fast fashion industries are thriving more than ever. I would like it to end for many reasons. I'm not an expert on like anti-fast fashion, whatever, but I can tell you that fast fashion doesn't really have a place in a sustainable lifestyle for many reasons. First of all, just the fact you're like creating demand for products that will constantly be taking resources away from various parts of the world. The processing and production of these items is leading to pollution in marginalized communities, maybe that child labor, who knows, even the human trafficking. It's like, I just like don't be a part of it. Just don't be a part of the fast fashion. Not to mention that they're like stealing design ideas from real artists and professionals. So people who are coming up with original designs are not getting paid for them. But yeah, I don't know, just all sorts of things. What do you think? I talked about a lot of things. It's like a whole spectrum of topics. I don't think that this is an exhaustive list. There's like plenty of stuff that I'm sure, I hope that somebody brings up and be like, hey, what about this? And it's like, yes, let's add it to the conversation. We can be aware of more than one thing at one time, especially considering the fact that many of the things on the list affect people of color, Black and brown people, marginalized communities all over the world. Let's keep this conversation going. Write a comment in the comment section, like this video if you're into this kind of content, and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. I talk about sustainability, awareness, I don't know, all sorts of things like self-sufficiency. I cut my own hair sometimes, maybe you've seen that. And yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for joining me.